Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah. In today's podcast, we'll break down the Celtics versus Lakers game. We'll go around the NBA and do a bit of an injury update. We'll see how the Rockets' small ball lineup is working out. We'll talk about the struggles for the Clippers as of late and the success for the Hawks before ending the show with who's hot and who's not. Now, like I said, we're going to be breaking down the Lakers versus Celtics game. Could be a potential finals matchup. Hopefully, it would be a very exciting one to see. It would be the 13th time in history that these two famous ball clubs would be facing each other in the NBA Finals. And obviously, this is a very historic matchup. Both teams have 33 titles between them. And we know the history between them as well, going back to the 50s, the 60s, 70s, 80s. Like LeBron said it, this matchup holds a lot of weight, especially notably thinking about Magic versus Bird, or even most recently when Kobe was taking on Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, and Kevin Garnett. This rivalry holds a lot of weight, and for players in today's era, it's very important for them to establish themselves in this type of history because it will eventually be looked back on for sure. In this one, the Celtics great Bill Russell was actually attending the game and sporting a Kobe's Laker jersey. So even though he was a Celtics great, he was showing support, showing love for Kobe Bryant, who obviously, as we all know, passed away a couple weeks ago in a helicopter crash along with his daughter and 7 other people. So to see him pay respect that way, I thought was really cool, very humbling. And then Celtics as well, they wore purple wristbands with either the number 8 or the number 24 on them in this matchup. The last matchup between these two teams, the Celtics took the victory. They beat the Lakers pretty convincingly, 139-107. But in this particular game, the Celtics would be without Kemba Walker, their star point guard. He would be out with left knee soreness, so they don't think it's anything long-term, not a big injury that'll keep him sidelined for a long time, just something that keeps nagging him, so they're going to give him a little bit of extra time to heal it and to get right before obviously making the playoff push. So without him, obviously it would be a very tough game for Boston, and it was tough starting in this one. They only scored 19 points in the first quarter, so started off extremely slow, whereas the Lakers, they jumped out to 28 points in the first quarter. And then the second, they responded really well, especially with Tatum. He had 18 points alone in the second half, 35 total for the Celtics for a 56-54 lead at halftime. So the Celtics had a big comeback push, and that kind of led into the third quarter as well. Tatum posted another 18 points in this quarter, in the third quarter, and it was matched by Anthony Davis, who had 16 points of his own. Nothing would really separate these two teams heading into a wild fourth quarter. The game would go back and forth between these two teams heading down the wire. With the game tied at 105, Anthony Davis hit a big three with 2 minutes and 10 seconds left to play. The Celtics would respond with a nice pump fake, power dribble, and pull-up from Hayward for 2, and a Jaylen Brown corner 3 to regain the lead 110-108 with 1:17 left to play. Then, with the Lakers down 1, this is the big moment of the game. LeBron James would back down Jaylen Brown down in the post. He would fake a move to the baseline and then fade away near the elbow and knock it down to regain the lead and eventually take the win seeing the Lakers win this game 114-112. The Celtics honestly looked in control most of this game, and especially down the stretch as well. Even though this game was going back and forth a lot of the time, it just felt like they couldn't capitalize. They had a couple key turnovers, especially one from Jason Tatum. He's throwing over to, or someone was trying to throw it to Jason Tatum and ended up throwing it out of bounds. And then a couple moments where they could have had the final shot. Anthony Davis missed a free throw. They were going down the court, only down 2, and they got the ball late to Jason Tatum, and it didn't matter at the end because he was called for offensive foul anyway, elbowing KCP in the face, and not even getting a shot off in time anyway, even if the shot was allowed. So Celtics just looked like they couldn't necessarily capitalize on the chances that they could have created, and players on the Celtics team admitted to this as well, saying they probably should have won this game, but just didn't execute down the stretch. And it's tough when they're playing on the road and the momentum's continuously shifting. The home crowd can definitely sway the way that the game ends up ending. So for them, it was unfortunate for them, but a good learning experience for them heading into, a potential finals matchup between these two teams, because even though the Milwaukee Bucks are definitely favored to go to the finals and coming out of the East, I think that the Boston Celtics can really combat them, really push them to their limits. The Celtics have a lot of key pieces that are just really clicking at the right times, and they just have a lot of skill to them, and I think they're the most well-suited to, really beat the Bucks to that spot, to the finals. Maybe the Toronto Raptors, but in my opinion, I think the Celtics are more well-equipped for longevity as well. Their young core, I think, would be really special in this playoffs. Unfortunately for them, though, it was just the star players, and without Kemba Walker, it was tough to really stay afloat in this one. Boston's bench only had 11 points. They only had 5 points through 3 quarters in this one, and they just didn't have the impact that they really needed them to have in this matchup. Whereas the Lakers bench, on the other hand, had 43 points. So big push from the bench, as well as their dynamic duo, of course. But Jason Tatum steals all the headlines. Since Paul Pierce in March 2001, Tatum is the youngest ever to get 40-plus points in the Lakers versus Celtics matchup. He got 41 points, 5 rebounds, and 2 assists with a steal and 2 blocks. And he tied his career high 41 points that he set against the Pelicans earlier this year. So Jason Tatum has reached another level. I mean, it's been talked about for some time now. The rookie campaign that he had, a good follow-up season last year, playing really well. But now I think he's starting to become part of that superstardom conversation, especially now since he's gotten an all-star appearance under his belt. This kid has continued to work on his game. His footwork is flawless, and he has so many tools in his arsenal to be such a dangerous player in this league, and he's really starting to put it all together. After the game, LeBron even said so himself, posting that this kid is an absolute problem, #YoungKing. So getting the nod from LeBron, even though you lost the game, you got to feel good about that, and you got to feel good about the way he's playing right now. He's just on another level, and he could continue playing like this too, and push in that, and just seeing just how high his ceiling really is. Jaylen Brown as well played pretty well in this game. He had 20 points, 6 rebounds with 3 steals. Thies had 16 points, 9 rebounds. And Marcus Smart, who was starting in place of Kemba Walker, didn't have the impact that he did when he was starting for Jaylen Brown, but he did have 14 points, 7 rebounds with 2 steals. And then Hayward, he had a very good all-around game. Not enough scoring output from him, in my opinion, that they need him to have. He had 10 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists for an almost triple-double. On the other side, the Lakers played extremely well, especially down the stretch, being very clutch. Anthony Davis as well, hitting some big shots down the stretch. He had 32 points, 13 rebounds with 2 blocks. So really making a case for, Defensive Player of the Year, especially after the game he just had where he had 7 blocks. The man's a monster. Great rim protector. LeBron, another near triple-double, had 29 points, 8 rebounds, and 9 assists. And then Kyle Kuzma off the bench. The type of scoring output that they would want from him on a night-to-night basis. He had 16 points and 4 rebounds. And Dwight Howard as well, coming off the bench, 10 points, 7 rebounds. So a great performance overall from the Los Angeles Lakers, and a great win for them too in this matchup that could potentially be a finals matchup. I mean, that's the way they probably would treat it. And then in this historic matchup in itself, it just gives that extra competitiveness to it. And so coming out victorious in this one is bragging rights for sure, even though the Celtics won the last one big. Another big news from the Lakers, they waived DeMarcus Cousins to make room for Markieff Morris. So if you can't remember from previous podcasts, Marcus Morris, not Markieff, Marcus Morris went to the Los Angeles Clippers. The Lakers missed out on him. So instead, they go after his brother, Markieff Morris, and Marcus actually made a joke about the fact that, you know what, they could probably just live together and carpool together to Staples Center when they play games. And I think that's a really cool and very unique thing to see in the NBA, especially since, you know, two teams never really share an arena, first of all, and two teams definitely don't have brothers that play in the same arena either. So it's a very unique situation. I think that would be extremely cool to see if they can separate that competitiveness with, you know, obviously their blood love for each other. So I thought that was really cool. Very good pickup for the Los Angeles Lakers. But meanwhile, on the other side, in the Western Conference, the Lakers doing great, putting pieces together, just won a big game. But on the other side, the Bucks, they've clinched the playoffs. They're the fastest team to do so in NBA history. The Warriors had previously had it from the year that they went 73-9, but now it's the Milwaukee Bucks. It's February 23rd, and they have already clinched the playoffs. It's insane. They didn't play this past Sunday, but they clinched it because the Wizards lost, despite Bradley Beal scoring a career-high 53 points. Get this man on another team so he can be productive. That's just unfair. You score 53, you should win a game. Most recently, the Milwaukee Bucks beat the 76ers, who have been extremely underwhelming this season. And in this matchup between Giannis and Embiid, Giannis won this round. He had 31 points, 17 rebounds, and 8 assists. So an absolute monster performance from him, whereas Embiid had a very quiet double-double with 17 points, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists. And the Bucks won the game 119-98. So the Milwaukee Bucks are proving their dominance time and time again, and the Sixers continue to be underwhelming. And until they figure it out, they're going to have a tough task to try and get out of the East, but I just don't see that they can do it right now. So the Bucks may have destroyed the Sixers, but they've had a lot of injuries this season, their latest being Ben Simmons. Him, among other stars, have gotten hurt lately. We'll take a look at who coming up next.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about the historic matchup between the Los Angeles Lakers and the Boston Celtics. And after the Celtics got the Lakers in the first round, blowing them out by almost 20 points, the Lakers take this one down the stretch. It was a close game, going back and forth in the fourth quarter. And an eventual turnaround jumper from LeBron James would be the deciding factor, would win the game. The Celtics wouldn't even get a chance to put a shot off, with Tatum getting called for an offensive foul. And so the Lakers would hold on and win that game. Big win for them on their home court and a potential finals matchup like we've talked about before. We also talked about the Milwaukee Bucks already clinching a playoff spot. It's February 23rd, and they're already going to the playoffs. It's the fastest in NBA history that a team has clinched playoff berth. The previous owner of that stat was Golden State Warriors when they went 73-9, but now it's them. The Bucks, their most recent victory was against 76ers, who are currently playing without Ben Simmons. He actually left the game against the Bucks on Saturday in that 119-98 loss. He had sat out previously with back soreness in his last game, and then came back for this game against the Milwaukee Bucks, and he ended up tweaking his back. There is some level of concern surrounding the possible nature of the injury, so by this I'm assuming that they're kind of concerned about how severe his injury really could be. When it comes to backs, it's kind of difficult to tell. The timetable varies per player, in my opinion. Just look at Michael Porter Jr. It had him sidelined for a very long time. So if they're concerned about it, it's probably not a good look. And if they have Ben Simmons out for a long period of time, the Sixers' troubles are just going to continue because he is the absolute engine for that team. Even though Embiid is the big star on the team, the offense mostly flows through Ben Simmons and through his playmaking. And even though he doesn't have a huge outpouring of scoring, he's only averaging 16.7 points this season, he impacts the game in so many other ways with the 7.8 rebounds per game and 8.2 assists per game. So he's a great all-around superstar. He pushes the pace. He has great ball handling skills. He's good in the low post. Obviously, he's not a great shooter, but when one of your big stars are not in the game, it's going to hurt your team. And so if they have him out for a long period of time, with the amount of injuries that they've already had this season, it's going to be tough for the Sixers to try and, really prove that they can make it out of the East because they've already been struggling so much this season. And so it's going to be tough. Tobias Harris, too, he's injured right now with a knee injury, and he's not expected to be out long, but still, it just shows that how many injuries they've had. Like Josh Richardson just came back. He was out for a while. And Joel Embiid has been in and out of the lineup due to injuries as well. So this Sixers team has been bleeding. They've been very inconsistent this season, having some impressive games here and there, like beating the Bucks, beating the Celtics at times, and then other games where they just disappear. So without the Sixers, without Ben Simmons, I don't think the Sixers can be a competitive team. I don't think Joel Embiid can carry the team by himself because as good as Embiid is, he needs someone feeding him, and without Simmons, I don't know who that next person up would be for them. And it's going to be tough for them to make it out of the East, but hopefully it's not a long-term injury. Right now they're sitting in 5th place. The Pacers are behind them, but they've been playing really poor as of late. And then the Brooklyn Nets, Orlando Magic's not going to catch them because both those teams are under 500. Not great teams, really. So it's just about staying higher up in the standings as of right now. But sitting in 5th, they're not necessarily comfortable, but they could be in a better situation. For another injury update, Jaren Jackson Jr. in his second year having the Grizzlies playing really well with Ja Morant. These two are the cornerstone of the Grizzlies franchise moving forward. They're already meshing and playing extremely well together. He sprained his left knee, and he's going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks. So this could be disaster for the Grizzlies. He injured it late in the second quarter against the Lakers, and you just hate to see this because of like what I said. They're playing extremely well this season, better than most people had expected. They're at 28-28 as of right now. They're 3 games ahead of the Portland Trailblazers and 3.5 ahead of the New Orleans Pelicans. And they're just barely holding on to that last playoff spot right now. And losing Jaren Jackson Jr. hurts tremendously. He has 16.9 points per game this season, and he's shooting 39.7% from three-point land and has 1.6 blocks per game. So he's a huge impact on the defensive end and the offensive end because of just how much he's grown into his role and because of the tandem that him and John Morant have, built over this season. Like I said, currently in the last playoff spot, and with teams like the Portland Trail Blazers who are right behind them playing extremely well, especially in their most recent game against the Thunder. Melo hit a dagger in that game, played his best game in a Blazers uniform, scored 32 points. First time he scored 30 or more points for the first time since 2017. So when you have Melo, getting into his groove again, really playing well, and then CJ McCollum as well in this game had 41 points, 9 rebounds, 12 assists for a monster double-double. And they're doing this without Damian Lillard. So the Blazers are catching fire when they need to. They're really making a push for that last spot. And they have so much talent to them that you expect them to maybe push out the Grizzlies during this time where you're losing one of your best players in Jaren Jackson Jr. So it's going to be tough for them to hold on to that spot with the Blazers playing as well as they are and with, Grizzlies' one of the better players being out, and not even mentioning the fact that the New Orleans Pelicans are right there too and playing extremely well in their own right. Zion is incredible. He's an absolute marvelous talent. He's playing crazy. He's just scored 28 points against Golden State Warriors. No one can guard him. Holiday as well. He went off in the second half against the Warriors to really propel them because the Warriors were being very competitive in the first half. It kind of burnt out as they only have 9 available players during this game. But I just don't see anyone able to guard Zion Williamson. And due to that fact, and due to the fact that Brandon Ingram's having a career year, Lonzo Ball's numbers are up, and just everything about this New Orleans Pelicans team shows me that they're probably going to make a push to this playoff picture as well. And they could even potentially take that 8th spot. They could potentially even take that 7 and 8 spot, talking about the Blazers and the Pelicans. So it's very possible. And like I said, without Jaren Jackson Jr., it's going to be tough. Very, very tough. They're on a 2-game skid, so it could be trouble for them. And their dream season, their Cinderella story of a season, could potentially end with no playoffs, which would be very disappointing for them. Another injury update. You probably have heard this already. I alluded to this idea last podcast, but Kyrie Irving officially is out for the year. He's going to have season-ending surgery on his injured shoulder. And so I think that is absolutely it for Brooklyn. Even though they still have a decent squad, with Karis LeVert, Joe Harris, Spencer Dinwiddie, and they're still sitting in 7th place and currently are 7-3 in their last 10 games. I don't see them going anywhere in the playoffs, even if they make it into the playoffs without KD, without Kyrie, your 2 biggest stars that you got in the offseason. Neither of them really playing this season. This season is more so just building your roster, gaining that confidence for when these 2 superstars come back so that their bench can be productive and have that invaluable experience when their 2 biggest stars are out. So for me, Brooklyn, if they make it to the playoffs, it's just bragging rights, but they won't go anywhere at all without that, without their 2 biggest stars. So it's very unfortunate for Kyrie, who's, battled injuries all season long, kind of came back for a minute, then went out, and then now season-ending surgery. They probably just threw in the towel with him. But he is very injury-prone, so I'd be shocked to see if he comes back fully healthy and can play a full season next season. In better, happier injury news updates, Stephen Curry is cleared for contact, and he has set a date to play March 1st. His first game would be against the Washington Wizards, who, like I just said, lost the game when Bradley Beal scored 53 points. So it would be a very good game for Stephen Curry to dip his feet back into the water of the NBA. And just to see one of the game's biggest stars come back to playing is always a nice sight to see, especially since, he's such a marvelous talent, 2-time MVP, 1-time unanimous MVP, only in history. So it'll definitely be exciting to see him back on the court. With the Rockets going all in on small ball, it's led to some unorthodox defensive sets against them. The Utah Jazz, the latest team being experimental. Find out how it went for them coming up next.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just did a little injury update. Ben Simmons has been injured with his back. He left the game against the Milwaukee Bucks in their blowout loss. Also, Jaren Jackson Jr. of the Memphis Grizzlies is injured as well. Going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks. But during this time, the Grizzlies could potentially see themselves slip out of a playoff spot. They're holding on to that 8th spot right now, with the Blazers and the Pelicans coming in hot. And then Kyrie Irving is out for the year. Season-ending surgery on his injured shoulder, meaning that the Brooklyn Nets probably are not going to be doing anything in these playoffs this season. Moving forward now, we're talking about Westbrook against the Utah Jazz. These two teams have been neck and neck all season long. Going into this particular game, the Jazz were ahead in 4th place with the Rockets in 5th. And we kind of talked about them playing in the playoffs last podcast. And I kind of gave the nod to the Utah Jazz just because I felt like at the end of the day, I'm not sure that small ball is really going to work. And I even alluded to the fact that Utah Jazz have Rudy Gobert, who is one of the best defenders in the league, back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year. And I don't think that, small ball would necessarily work against the Utah Jazz because of his length, because of his ability to rim protect. And I thought he'd be very productive on the offensive end as well. So this game really put those type of predictions, those type of analysis to the test. But like I said before, the Rockets are committing to the small ball. They got rid of Capella. They bring in Covington, and they really run it with Westbrook and Harden, who are two of the best ISO players in the league. And so this leads to a bunch of unorthodox defending, really. In this game, Gobert was matched up with Russell Westbrook. The reason being is because they don't want to lose Gobert's presence and his ability on the floor. I mean, he is an all-star caliber player. You don't want him not on the floor just because the team's playing small ball. So they put Gobert on Westbrook. And the thought process behind this is that it would make it tougher for Westbrook on the drive to try and finish at the basket because of his length, because of his ability to get blocks and protect the rim. And so you're kind of pushing for Westbrook to take shots. And thinking about this is pretty decent logic, knowing that Westbrook takes ill-advised shots, so he would drive into Gobert and make it tougher on himself. And he's not the best outside shooter either. So on paper, this makes sense. The only issue is Westbrook is a freak athlete, absolute freak athlete, and a person you can't really necessarily judge on paper just because of what the stats say. It doesn't mean he can't impact the game with his athleticism against a big. And especially against Rudy Gobert, I always go back to this highlight in my mind, Stephen Curry completely putting Rudy Gobert in a spin cycle. And even though that was with, technical ability and his dribbling ability, Russell Westbrook can speed by him. He could step back. He has a lot of tools to him as well, just at a faster pace. And I looking at this, I wasn't sure that this would work out. And spoiler alert, it doesn't. The first quarter, though, was pretty even. The two teams only being separated by 2 points in this one. But a strong first half from Clarkson, who had 20 points in the first half, helped the Jazz take control of the game and give them the lead at halftime 66-62. The turning point of this game, though, would be the third quarter. Coach Dan Snyder says their defensive energy and competitiveness just wasn't good enough in this quarter at all. He said that they weren't aggressive. They only had one foul called on them the whole quarter, so that could tell you how, aggressive and how they were bodying this team. They just weren't competing. They weren't being physical enough with this Houston Rockets team who have a great offense. And then Houston, on the other hand, they erupted. They scored 38 points in this one, while the Jazz only managed 19. So that was a rough quarter for the Utah Jazz. And a lot of it had to do with the defensive sets that the Jazz were throwing at the Rockets. At times, they would double Harden. And this makes sense again on paper. The logic is get the ball out of Harden's hands because he scores more points than any player in the league. But when you do that against a team that shoots a lot of three-pointers, that's a dangerous game to be playing because they shoot probably over 35 three-pointers a game and make a pretty decent amount of them too. So even if you don't double, though, on James Harden, or even if you do a special zone defense, it's tough because Harden and Westbrook, like I said, are two of the best ISO players in the league. So if you don't double Harden, he's going to go at you 1v1. He's going to find a way to score. If you do double Harden, you're leaving up open other people. Take a gamble and have them beat you rather than the two superstars. Fine, I get it. But in this particular game, they got lit up. The biggest lead at one point for the Houston Rockets would be 16. The Jazz shot 31.6% from the field and 14.3% from three in the third quarter, and they struggled big time. They also had 5 of their 13 turnovers in this quarter alone. This also could be due to the fact that the Rockets have also improved their defense as well, just being more energetic, being more physical than the Utah Jazz were. Mitchell had a strong closing quarter in the fourth, scoring 18 points, but the closest that they would get to a comeback was when they cut the deficit to 7 a couple times. But that would be it. The Rockets would go on to win this game 120-110. And you go back to looking at this matchup, what Coach Snyder went for with Rudy Gobert on Russell Westbrook. I mean, anytime you have a big against a player as athletic, as quick, as agile, and as aggressive as Russell Westbrook, I just never see that being a good matchup. And I could see his thought process with it. And, sometimes you got to take a gamble. Maybe he's trying this out now in the regular season before they meet in the playoffs, if they meet there. But Russell Westbrook had his way, and he said after the game, quote, "I don't know if it's working. I get whatever I want. I get to the basket. I shoot. I drive and kick. The pace and speed you can't scout for," end quote. And that's a huge, huge point. The pace and speed you can't scout for. Like I said, it sounds good on paper to put Gobert on Westbrook, but the amount of speed and pace that Westbrook has to speed by him or speed by him and pull back and pull up, it's just going to be a nightmare for him. So Westbrook in this game had 34 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. So the thought process of Rudy Gobert potentially limiting him didn't work out. James Harden would have a game-high 38 points, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, with 2 steals and a block. So it looks like James Harden's starting to play a little more defense this season. He's playing a lot better on that end, but scoring 38 points becomes normal for him this season. He's been scoring at a ridiculous rate this season. Also, both of them had a lot less turnovers than they have had in games past. I've been a big critic of them because they both are very careless with the basketball and turn it over a lot, but in this game, pretty well at retaining it. Gordon and McLemore had 12 points each, and then on the Utah Jazz side, Donovan Mitchell had a really good game. He had 31 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and other than him and Jordan Clarkson, who had 22 points and 7 rebounds, they didn't get much help. Mike Conley had 13 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, but you would like to see him score a lot more. I don't think he hasn't been getting up into a lot of points in this season. He's been obviously injured for the first half of it, but he can't really get that scoring output that he's had in years past. And then Bogdanovic, who's generally a person you can rely on to get over 20 points, he scored 12 points in this one, had 6 rebounds on 3 of 10 shooting and 1 for 6 from downtown. Bogdanovic also had a really poor game against the Rockets a few games ago, but he hit a huge game-winning 3 against them to really be the hero and change the narrative of him having a bad game to him being clutch. But in this game, he just couldn't get any rhythm going, and only 12 points. Gobert as well only had 12 points and 6 rebounds with 2 blocks. So not the type of output of scoring that you would want from your team. Joe Ingles not even in double figures scoring, only shot the ball 5 times. So really a big struggle all around for the Utah Jazz. They need more continuity. They need more chemistry. But both teams now are 36-20, with Houston now winning the series 2-1. So they're in 4th, and the Utah Jazz are in 5th. And like I said before, this is a potential playoff matchup. So every game counts, and now that the Jazz are down 2-1, they know what they got to improve on if these two teams match up in the playoffs. And they've got a few games left, 20 to 30 games left, to push the Houston Rockets out of that 4th place spot so they can get the home court advantage rather than the other way around. Another team in that playoff picture that hasn't been doing themselves any favors as of late are the Los Angeles Clippers. They're currently on a 3-game skid. Their latest loss coming at the hands of the Sacramento Kings. We break it down coming up next.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Isiah. We just talked about the Houston Rockets matching up against the Utah Jazz. And because the Houston Rockets have committed to the small ball lineup, getting rid of Capella and bringing in Covington, we know that some teams are going to have matchup problems. One of those teams being the Utah Jazz, because they have a great all-star in Rudy Gobert, but they don't want him to not be on the floor. So Coach Dan Snyder of the Utah Jazz had the idea of putting Gobert on Russell Westbrook. And simply put, it did not work. Westbrook scored 34 points and went off, got whatever he wanted from that matchup. James Harden as well scored 38. So a Rockets team that's playing as well as they are when Harden and Westbrook both are performing, it's tough to beat. And so Snyder's got to get back to the drawing board and figure out something to do, because these two teams, as of right now, are looking like they're going to play in the playoffs. So he's got to figure something out for this matchup. And now moving forward in this playoff picture, the Los Angeles Clippers are above both of these teams in 3rd place, but they're on a 3-game skid. It's the longest losing streak of the season so far for them. And we kind of talked about their ability to win the playoffs in the last podcast. I think this team is really well equipped to go and win the Western Conference just because of their good mix of star power with young talent and some veterans as well. They have a great all-defensive team when everyone is healthy. Paul George, one of the best two-way guards in the league. Kawhi Leonard, a former Defensive Player of the Year. Montrezl Harrell is just a mean defender, and Patrick Beverley is a nuisance on the defensive end. So this team has a lot of defensive capabilities, And not even to mention the fact that they're so good offensively as well when they're clicking. With Lou Williams coming off the bench and Montrezl Harrell continuously improving his game, the Los Angeles Clippers could be the most dangerous team in the West. And they're very well equipped to beat the Los Angeles Lakers, who are in first place right now in the West. So I think they have a lot of ability, and I think they definitely can turn it on come playoff time because they just have that ability. Like Kawhi Leonard as well. It's a great person to look at when talking about this because he is just a different animal when it comes to the playoffs. They've also been acquiring the right pieces. Just brought in Marcus Morris. Just brought in Reggie Jackson. So they're making the right moves, and they have the right team to beat the Los Angeles Lakers, who these two teams will probably be the Western Conference matchup. So they're doing everything right. The problem is, right now, they just can't stay healthy. Kawhi Leonard says that the time is now to get healthy and to get better. They just, because of how many injuries they've had, they haven't been able to get any type of chemistry, any type of rhythm going. And that's the reason for this 3-game losing streak. In this game, they don't have Paul George, who is out with a hamstring injury for the 11th straight game. And no Patrick Beverley either. That's your starting point guard with a groin injury for your 5th straight game. So there's 26 games left in the season to get everything on the right page. But in order to do that, everyone needs to get healthy first. There's a lack of rhythm within the squad because of all these injuries. And it's the 28th different lineup that they're throwing out, which is tied for the most with the Pistons. So it's really tough for this team to get any type of momentum, any type of chemistry when you're constantly changing your lineups and constantly have different people in and out. And not even including the fact that you have new players on the roster day to day, like Reggie Jackson, who's making his debut against the Sacramento Kings. And because of Patrick Beverley being injured, he gets thrown into the starting lineup with really no time to get to know his teammates, play calls. And so it's a tough way for him to make his debut with his team. And not to mention the fact that the Kings are coming off a big win against the Memphis Grizzlies all the way back on Thursday. The Clippers, they hadn't had a game yet, so they're coming off an all-star break. And it really showed, you could tell, because they were absolutely atrocious in the first quarter. They shot the ball 16.7% from the field and 14.3% from three-point land for a measly 13 points in the first quarter. 13 points. That's insane. That's ridiculous. That's an NBA team scoring 13 points in 12 minutes. In the second, though, they would get back on track. They would outscore the Kings 35-29 with Lou Will and Kawhi leading the way with 10 and 9 respectively to make the score, just a little more respectable than what it was before. 54-48 at half with the Kings leading, and the Clippers would continue to build on their second quarter performance with another 35-point quarter. Kawhi Leonard had 15 in this quarter alone, but the Kings would keep their lead, scoring 34 of their own. And now in the fourth quarter, the Clippers look to make a push after having scored 35 in 2 straight quarters. So you'd think, they've started to got a rhythm. They got out their poor shooting in the first quarter when they scored 13 points. They cut the deficit to 97-94 before missing 10 of their last 11 shots, shooting almost as poorly as they did in the first. They were not clutch down the stretch at all. 10 of your last 11 shots you missed. The Clippers lose this game 112-103. The Clippers also had 19 turnovers in this game, so they were absolutely careless with the ball, and they also couldn't knock it down when they had the ball. So in a lot of ways, they just didn't get the right momentum in this game, didn't get the right tracking. And after a first quarter as bad as the one that they had, they really didn't deserve to win and could never really recover. Even though they were close, did cut the deficit, that type of start tends to come back and haunt you in the end. The Kings also have just been playing really well as of late. This is the second loss that the Clippers have to the Kings in less than a month. The Kings are also have won 8 of their last 12 games. And even though they almost blew a 14-point lead, they held on. They've been playing with a lot more confidence. Luke Walton has said it himself. Coach of the Sacramento Kings has said it himself. That he just sees that his team is playing with more confidence. Fox says that De'Aaron Fox says that this team just believes in themselves a little bit more. And they just have good team chemistry going for them right now. Unfortunately for them, though, it could be too little too late as they are sitting out of the playoff spot. Like we talked about the playoff picture before, Memphis is in 8th place, but the Sacramento Kings are sitting in 12th with a record of 23-33. So pretty well under 500 right now. If they were in the Eastern Conference, they might be able to make it with most of the teams there being pretty poor. But unfortunately for the Sacramento Kings, they're in the Western Conference, so probably not going to make the playoffs. But this is really good for them because this team can be very good in the near future. They have a lot of young talent, a good young core. So they could build on this moving into next season because they've had issues being consistent throughout this season. So really they could start nailing down their identity and their ability to win ball games. Bazemore in this game, their newly acquired player in that trade that saw Trevor Ariza go to the Portland Trailblazers. Bazemore had a season high in this game, 23 points and 6 rebounds with 4 steals and a block. So even though this guy scored a season high of 23 points, I feel like his best attributes is his defending ability. This guy is so lengthy. He's so physical. He's very quick as well. So 4 steals and a block just shows just how good he is defensively. Bogdanovich, their own Bogdanovich, scored 20 points and 5 rebounds. And then De'Aaron Fox had 20 points, 4 rebounds, 8 assists. And Harry Giles, he got his first career double-double, 14 points and 12 rebounds. And then Barnes and Bielitsa round out double-digit scores with 13 and 10 respectively. And on the other side of the court for the Clippers, Kawhi, he played a pretty good game in his first game since getting the All-Star MVP. He scored 31 points. He had 8 rebounds, 5 assists with 2 steals. So he got it done all over the court. You can't really blame him for lack of effort. Lou Williams either. He scored really a good amount of points. He scored 24 points, had 4 boards. But the problem for me with Lou Williams in this one, he had 8 turnovers. 8 turnovers. That's so poor. Retain the basketball. Value the basketball. If you start turning over the ball, if you get to 5 turnovers, you got to make sure your game is clean after that. Because getting more than 5 turnovers, getting 5 turnovers at all is just poor. And for a player like Lou Williams, I expect more. Montrezl Harrell had a double-double. He had 16 points and 10 rebounds with 2 steals. And that was it for double-digit scoring. So clearly the Clippers were struggling offensively, if you hadn't already gotten that from what I had said previously. Reggie Jackson, like I said, in his debut, had 8 points, 2 rebounds, 4 assists, so nothing spectacular. But then again, he was just thrown into the deep end and told to swim to shore. So it's an unfortunate debut for him, but I'm sure that he will have a better impact moving forward. Marcus Morris as well, another player that's been kind of disappointing so far. He had 6 points, also had 5 turnovers. Like I mentioned before, not impressive. And I continuously say that I feel like Marcus Morris will eventually learn his role within this team and have a better impact, especially the way that he was playing with the Knicks earlier this season. But it just hasn't happened yet. I think once all the top players for the Clippers are back, everyone's healthy, it could be a lot better for this team. Nothing is clicking right now, and they're on a 3-game skid, but they are still in 3rd place, so they're holding on, even though they just lost to the Kings. And speaking of the Kings, they have now beaten the Grizzlies and the Clippers for a 2-game win streak following the All-Star break. And another team that has had some impressive wins lately is the Atlanta Hawks. We take a look at their last 2 games coming up right after this.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about the Clippers losing their third game in a row, their worst losing streak of the season, to the Sacramento Kings, who have been playing pretty well as of late. They've beaten the Clippers twice within the last month. They also just beat the Grizzlies as well. So they've been playing pretty well. They got a lot more confidence going on. But the Clippers, on the other hand, they have no confidence, they got no chemistry, and they got no players. A lot of players are injured right now. Paul George out for 11 straight games. Patrick Beverley out for 5 straight games. And they've used 28 different lineups this season. That's tied for the most with the Detroit Pistons. So they got a lot of work to do to get their team healthy. They got a lot of work to do to get this team rolling going into playoffs. Because right now they have no chemistry, no identity, and just no idea how to play together really. And they win a few games this season because of just the pure talent that they have. But when this team is fully healthy, they're going to be dangerous, especially when they start getting a lot of momentum. Now moving forward, the Atlanta Hawks have been pretty impressive as of late. They're by no means an exciting team other than Trae Young's marvelous second year. They're second to last in the East, but they're 5-5 in their last 10, so some improvement, I guess. Find the silver lining for this team. They still haven't played with Clint Capella, which I think could be extremely interesting to see. He's not back until sometime in March because he has some heel issues right now. But him paired up with Trae Young, I think is going to be a great pairing. Trae Young's already having a fantastic sophomore season, and adding a big that he can just throw lobs to and, deflect some of the offensive, necessity of his capabilities in every single game would be a great plus for Trae Young. And even though they haven't played with Capella yet, their most recent games have been very impressive. What was most impressive about these games was Trae Young, of course. I mean, who else? He had a career night, and he did it in style as well. He had a great game. They would be playing the Miami Heat, and in this game, early in the second quarter, the Hawks had started taking control of the game. They had an 11-point lead at one point with 5 minutes to play in the second quarter. Trae Young was a huge reason why that they had this lead. He had so many shots from deep, like 6 feet beyond the three-point line deep. I mean, the kid pulls up from the logo on the regular. He's basically Stephen Curry 2.0. He also has great playmaking as well. Had 4 assists through the first half, was really productive. On some of the shots where he was about to pull up from 3, it looked like he was about to get blocked, so he pulled up, found someone underneath the basket, got them easy buckets. So he was doing really well all across the board. And then the Heat, all of a sudden, would go on a run and eventually take the lead out of nowhere, going into halftime up 64-63. Adebayo already stuffing the stat sheet, highlighted by 2 steals, and he was doing really well creating for himself. He just won the NBA All-Star Skills Challenge, so he's showing off a little bit with his handles on some plays. And then the Heat would dominate the third, outscoring the Hawks 33-27, and so 96-88 going into the fourth quarter. This is where Trae Young would catch fire. One highlight play really stood out to me. He crossed up Iguodala, breaking his ankles. Iggy stumbled back as Trae Young knocked down a deep three. Nothing new there because he's so used to that, but putting the moves on Andre Iguodala, one of the most established defenders in the league, even though he hasn't been playing for quite some time, that's still very impressive to me. And so the Heat would continuously push their lead back out, but the Hawks just wouldn't go away. They eventually would take the lead with Herter and Young both hitting a barrage of threes that would eventually see them take the lead 116-115. Then Miami went on a run of their own, led by Butler and Adebayo, to put them up 124-119 with 1.5 to go. A big Hunter 3 would tie the game with 54 seconds on an assist from Trae Young. And then Cam Reddish had a huge steal, poking the ball away from Dragic, then racing down the floor to flush it home to regain the lead again with 30 seconds left. So just a couple minutes ago, the Miami Heat had a 5-point lead. But just like that, the Hawks took it right back. And Butler's game-tying 3 would just barely rim out. And Adebayo initially came down with it, so it looked like they were going to get another chance at it. But eventually he lost the ball, and that would be the end of the game. With Miami playing the foul game after that, Trae Young would go to the line and just stat pad a little more. The final score would end up being 129-124. Atlanta Hawks getting a very impressive win against a great Miami Heat team that's fourth in the East right now. Trae Young had 20 points in the fourth quarter. He had a career-high 50 points. He scored 50, dropped 50 like it was no problem. And he becomes the fourth youngest player to drop 50 points. Among those are Brandon Jennings, Devin Booker, and LeBron James. So pretty good company. Anytime you're in conversation with the king, you know that you're doing something right. So he's going off, playing really well. And it also brings up another Twitter beef that happened a while back. In their last game on December 10th, Jimmy Butler, after Trae Young had prematurely yelled, "It's over," when he hit a bucket with a minute left versus the Heat, Jimmy Butler had said, "This man, Trae Young, is a teller of the future." He was right. Game was over because the Miami Heat would end up taking the game and winning it down to the wire. And so after this game, Trae Young took to Twitter saying, "And FYI, at Jimmy Butler was right. I can see the future. I saw tonight happening a while ago. Hashtag, and I don't even like Twitter beefs, but..." So I thought that was pretty funny that he was, poking some fun at Jimmy Butler. And I'm sure it's all in good fun. There's definitely mutual respect between these two superstars. But Trae Young got the last laugh in this one because of the way that he called the game last time. Didn't get to hold on to the win, but this time he drops 50 points, becomes the fourth youngest to do so, and wins the game for the Atlanta Hawks. I thought that was a great clapback and a great way for Trae Young to just further establish himself in the NBA. I mean, what he's doing in his sophomore season is insane. And I mean, you could compare it with Luka Doncic as well. These two players are so young, and yet they're so good. It's just crazy to me that they're probably not even in their prime yet. So it's scary to think where they're going to be in a few years. Trae Young also had 8 assists with 2 steals in this game. DeAndre Hunter had 17.6 rebounds. Herter also had 17 points with 7 rebounds, 4 assists. Cam Reddish had a great game as well, 16 points, 4 rebounds. And then Collins and Teague both had 12 points in this contest. And now Miami, on the other side, has now lost 5 out of their last 6 games, but Butler isn't worried. He says all they've got is time. And so I think back to when we talked about the Los Angeles Clippers where Kawhi Leonard lost 3 games in a row, and he said, now is the time to get healthy and get things right. And he says right now. Whereas Butler has a different approach saying, nope, we got time. We're okay. This Miami Heat team has been playing really well all season long. And I don't think this is something to worry about for them, really. I really don't. I think they're going to get back on track and be a very dangerous team heading into the playoffs. Especially because Bam Adebayo is playing crazy. He had a career high of rebounds in this game. He had 28 points, 19 rebounds, 7 assists with 3 steals and a block. So he was stuffing the stat sheet in this one, getting it done all over the floor. Goran Dragic had 19 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Jimmy Butler almost had a triple-double with 17 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists with 2 steals. Crowder and Nunn both had 14 points, and it really raises the question, can the Miami Heat win an NBA title? I think they can. Even though they just lost to the Atlanta Hawks, I still think that they can do it. But it'd be really tough for them because they're going up against Milwaukee Bucks, Boston Celtics, Toronto Raptors. And so unless they start really putting some impressive games together, I don't know how I feel about them going deep in the playoffs. The Hawks definitely cannot win the finals this year, but they played against the Heat, a contender, really well. They also beat the Mavericks recently. That game, there was no Luka or Porzingis, so not as impressive, but still a pretty impressive feat to beat the Mavericks. And plus, John Collins had a monster game. 35 points and 17 rebounds with a steal and 2 blocks. That's probably a career night for him. Trae Young had 25 points, 6 rebounds, 10 assists, followed up a performance with a great double-double in this one after scoring 50 his previous game. And the Mavericks, obviously, without their 2 best players, and it's a chance for others to shine. Tim Hardaway Jr. had 33 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists. And Seth Curry as well, 22 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. So I think that's a good sign for them. Even without Luka Doncic and without Kristaps Porzingis, you like to see that your role players are getting some time, getting some extended minutes, and making the most of it as well. 33 points from Hardaway and 22 from Seth Curry. That's definitely a good sign to see. So regardless that the Mavericks without their 2 stars, I feel like they should still be better than the Atlanta Hawks, in my opinion. But a career night for John Collins and the star power of Trae Young outdid them. The Hawks have been somewhat hot as of late, but did they crack the hot or not top 5? Find out next.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. We just talked about how the Atlanta Hawks have had some impressive wins over the last 2 games. They beat the Miami Heat, who are 4th in the East right now, one of the better teams in the NBA this season. And it's because Trae Young dropped 50 points, career high, 50 points. Now he's the 4th youngest to ever have done so, alongside Devin Booker, LeBron James, and Jennings. So, impressive company. Anytime you're in conversation with the king, it's good. It means you're doing something right. And so the Atlanta Hawks have been pretty hot. But spoiler alert, they didn't make my hot or not list on either side, really. So we're going to start with who's been hot as of late. Coming in at number 5, we're going to go with Houston Rockets. They're on a 3-game win streak. They're 7-3 in their last 10 games. And small ball works for them. Ever since they've gone that way, they've been pretty successful playing that style. They scored the most points in the NBA this season other than the Bucks at 118.5 points per game. I think that's pretty impressive. Even though they do give up a lot of points, it's definitely impressive that they're putting up that many points consistently. Most recently, they also beat the Celtics and the Jazz within their last 3 games. So those are 2 really big name teams that they could potentially face in the playoffs, obviously playing the Celtics in the finals if that were to happen. Spoiler alert, I don't think that'll happen. That's just my opinion. But yeah, the Rockets come in at number 5 just because of the way that they've been playing lately, and they drop a lot of points per game. Coming in at number 4 is the Boston Celtics. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games. Like we talked about earlier in the podcast, they just lost to the Los Angeles Lakers, but in my honest opinion, they probably should have won that game. I think they just didn't execute, didn't have that closeout mentality that they needed in that game, where the Lakers did, on the other hand. They did beat the other LA team in the Clippers pretty recently, and the Thunder within their last 5 games. Plus, Tatum is officially a superstar. So I think that this team, after having him tie his career high at 41 points, and even though they lost to the Lakers, they're in a really good position to start pushing higher in the bracket of the Eastern Conference. And I think they can really give the Bucks a run for their money in the Eastern Conference. I really think that the Celtics could go to the NBA Finals this season. And so for me, they're number 4. Number 3 is the Lakers. They're on a 5-game win streak. They're 7-3 in their last 10 games. And their last 3 games just show how great they are this season. Their last 3 games, they beat the Boston. There's a reverse order. They beat the Boston Celtics, the Memphis Grizzlies, even though they're still a young team led by, John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr., who is hurt right now. That's still a really good Grizzlies team, a very ferocious team, a scrappy team. And the Denver Nuggets, they're in second place in the West, in case you forgot about them. Still a great opponent, and 5 games back from the Los Angeles Lakers. So those are 3 tough games in a row, and they won all of them. So Los Angeles Lakers have been very consistent, and they deserve that number 3 spot. Number 2 for me right now is the Toronto Raptors. They should be number 1, but I'll get to why they're not in a minute. The Raptors are on a 2-game win streak, but previously had won 15 in a row. So they've won 17 of their last 18 games. They're nuts. They're plus 7.2 in terms of their margin of victory. That's 0.2 less than the Lakers, to put it into perspective. And they just win games. They grind out wins. They also destroyed the Pacers, 127-81. I'm not sure what happened to the Pacers. I'm really not. But they've been playing really poorly as of late. And the Raptors have not been. They're a championship team. We talked about it last podcast. Once you win that championship, you kind of gain this higher mentality, higher competitiveness to you. It's a different mode, and they're on a different level right now. And they're just playing really, really well. But they're not number 1, and the reason why is because I have to give it to the Milwaukee Bucks. They just clinched the playoffs, and it's only February 23rd. Well, February 24th that this podcast is coming out, but it's February 23rd where they clinched playoffs. They're 8-2 in their last 10 games. They're on a 2-game win streak, and they still have only lost 8 times this year. That's a lot of W's. A lot of W's. And they have the best player in the NBA too, so they're the hottest team in the NBA. Whether or not their most recent record says so, if they're 8-2 in their last 10, I don't care. The Milwaukee Bucks are the best team in the NBA right now. On the defensive end, on the offensive end, doesn't matter. They're the best team. They're the team to beat. Some honorable mentions for who's hot. I want to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans. They've won 2 in a row. They're 7-3 in their last 10. Like I talked about before, with Zion Williamson now inserted into the lineup, they're really going to make a push to get that 8th spot, maybe even 7th spot in the Western Conference. They're 3.5 back to do so. They're right there. The Denver Nuggets as well, they're 7-3 in their last 10. They're still in second place. And in a Western Conference that has been extremely competitive this year, I think that is a very impressive feat. And then the Oklahoma City Thunder, they're on a 3-game winning streak. They're 7-3 in their last 10, and they're holding on to that 6th place spot. They're one of the most dangerous teams in the NBA in terms of closing out games, being clutch with Chris Paul, Dennis Schroeder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You got Danilo Gallinari. This team is really good, and a lot of people overlook them, including myself, and so they definitely deserve an honorable mention from me. And now moving over to who's not hot. Coming in at number 5 is the Chicago Bulls, who are 2-8 in their last 10. They did just beat the Wizards, but just a few games before that, they lost to the Wizards, and the 2 games after that, lost to the Hornets and the Suns. They were on a 8-game losing streak. So if you want to talk about who's not hot in the NBA, Chicago Bulls is definitely one of those teams. Argue with me if you want to. Coming in at number 4 is the Cleveland Cavaliers. They're on a 1-game losing streak. They're 3-7 in their last 10 games. They're last place in the East, but they've had somewhat of a tough schedule. They lost to the Heat, the Clippers, the Thunder, and the Raptors within their most recent games. But they also lost to the Warriors and the Knicks. So I feel like can't really give them too much slack just because in the games where they probably should squeeze out some W's, they don't. So can't give them too much love. So they're number 4 on this list. And then coming in at number 3, the Detroit Pistons are on a 6-game losing streak. That's rough. 2-8 in their last 10 games. And during this losing streak, they had plenty of opportunities to win some games. During this losing streak, they lost to the Knicks, who aren't that great, the Hornets, who have been really poor this season, and the Orlando Magic, who are injury-ridden right now, and kind of holding on to a playoff spot right now, but definitely can be pushed out if a couple teams wanted to win games. But as of right now, it doesn't look that way. So the Pistons have been losing a lot of games, and give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt. They have lost a lot in their squad, just traded away or just bought out Reggie Jackson, got rid of him. Blake Griffin's out for the season, traded away Andre Drummond. So this team is in shambles. They're blowing it up. And so they're not hot for that reason. Coming in at number 2 is Golden State Warriors. They're also on a 6-game losing streak. They're also 2-8 in their last 10, and they're last place in the Western Conference. They barely have had a full roster lately, though, with a lot of 10-day contract guys coming in and out of the squad. Just brought in Dragon Bender on a 10-day contract. So a lot of faces coming in and out of that team on a team that already has so many injuries. In their most recent game, Marquise Chris didn't play. Draymond Green didn't play. Klay Thompson's obviously been hurt all season long. Stephen Curry's been hurt all season long. And besides the Suns, they've had a pretty tough schedule as of late. They had the Pelicans, the Rockets, the Heat, and the Lakers. So giving a little bit of the benefit of the doubt to the teams, to the NBA's worst team in the Golden State Warriors. But on my list, number 1 is the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're on a 4-game losing streak. They're 1-9 in their last 10. And other than the Hornets that they lost to, they've had a pretty tough schedule too. They were up against the Nuggets, the Celtics, the Raptors. But then there were also games like against the Hawks that they lost. So, I don't know. I feel like they should probably be winning some games in these most recent games, but they just haven't been. So that's going to do it for this podcast. So as always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review because that really helps us out. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I would greatly appreciate it. I'm Isiah Quiroz. Thank you all. See you next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.